Today's story is about a young lady. Nicknamed Ziyu, Ziyu is from Wuhan. When she was little, her family lived in a housing complex for workers. Nearby was a well-known urban village in Wuhan. The primary school Ziyu attended was run by the factory where her parents worked. The factory had occupied a portion of the land belonging to the urban village. As compensation, the factory arranged jobs for many villagers and also allowed their children to attend the factory school. That's how Ziyu met one of her best friends, a girl named Zidu who lived in the urban village. Ziyu and Zidu have been close friends since primary school, and their friendship has lasted to this day, a rare and precious bond. Back then, after school, Ziyu would often visit Zidu's village to play. Don't be fooled by the fact that Zidu lived in an urban village. This particular village was very wealthy, with residents enjoying a high standard of living. Among their classmates, the children from the urban village, both boys and girls, were particularly generous. They never hesitated to spend money on snacks or toys, buying whatever they wanted without asking the price. This made the children from the factory complex, including Ziyu, quite envious. Ziyu often wondered how the villagers could live so well and have so much money. What left a deep impression on her was a large cherry blossom tree, planted right in the middle of the village entrance on the south side of the village. The tree's location was quite inconvenient, as it blocked the path for people coming and going. Even vehicles had to maneuver around it, making it quite troublesome. When Ziyu was very young, she was curious about this tree. Even before she met Zidu, the cherry blossoms were beautiful and little girls loved them. But the tree's placement was awkward. Ziyu asked her family why the tree was planted right in the middle of the entrance. Was it planted there on purpose? Didn't it block pedestrians? Her family couldn't give a clear answer, but her father said that the tree had been there as long as he could remember, and no one knew how many years it had been there. Later, when Ziyu got to know Zidu, she learned some local beliefs about the cherry blossom tree. Zidu, being a villager, told Ziyu that the tree was the reason their village was so wealthy. According to Zidu's grandpa, the tree had been planted long ago by an elderly Taoist with great wisdom, who had advised the village elders to plant it at the entrance. He said that as long as the tree stood there, it would bless the villagers with peace and prosperity. However, Zidu's grandfather had repeatedly warned her to stay away from the cherry blossom tree. Since she was little, he told her enter and exit the village through the northern entrance whenever possible. But he never explained why. Of course, being children, they were naturally curious and playful. When Ziyu and Zidu were in elementary school, climbing trees and wading in rivers were everyday activities for the two little girls. The cherry blossom tree, with its lush branches and many easy to climb limbs, was close to where they lived. As a result, the two of them spent a lot of time climbing up and down that tree. When they were little and they never had any accidents. Back then, the happiest moments for them were after school, when the two girls would climb up the cherry blossom tree together, find a sturdy branch to sit on, take out the snacks they had bought, and chat away while enjoying the beautiful sunset in the west. It was truly a carefree time. Even now, thinking back on those days still brings a sense of nostalgia and longing. In the spring, when you walked under that cherry blossom tree, the wind would blow and the petals would fall like a shower of flowers. However, there were some strange things about this tree. In Ziyu's memory, she had never seen any birds perch on its branches. Not only that, but the base of the tree would often have the corpses of stray cats and dogs for no apparent reason. It was unclear where these animals came from or why they ended up dead under the tree, and their deaths were quite horrifying. When Ziyu played in the urban village, she would sometimes overhear the adults chatting and making remarks about the tree. Some said that it might be haunted by some kind of malevolent spirit, and that it was not very auspicious. She remembered one time when she went to the village after school. and saw a crowd of people gathered around the tree making a lot of noise. She stood by and watched out of curiosity. After a while, she realized what was going on. Some young people in the village, probably influenced by someone's words, had decided that the tree was unlucky. They had brought tools like axes and saws to cut it down. However, the older villagers came out to stop them, insisting that the tree must not be cut down, even if it was dead. Some of the elders said that if the tree was cut down, the entire village would be doomed. It seems that this incident happened several times, until the old village chief and several other respected elders intervened and persuaded the young people to stop. That's how the cherry blossom tree was saved from being cut down. Ziyu was very curious about this, so she asked Zidu to find out from her grandfather what was so special about the tree. Zidu went back and asked her grandfather, and when she came back, she told Ziyu what she had learned. Her grandfather said that a long time ago, probably around the early years of the Republic of China, there was a once-in-a-century flood disaster in the village. On the first day of the 10th lunar month, which is the Cold Clothes Festival, there were no signs beforehand, but suddenly the flood waters came and destroyed more than half of the houses in the village. Fortunately, although many houses were destroyed, no one lost their lives. However, many people were injured and traumatized. After the flood waters receded and the village needed to be rebuilt, a specialist in feng shui was hired to help plan the layout of the village, especially the location of the main entrance. The feng shui master helped the villagers determine the position of the main gate. However, when the villagers started digging the foundation for the gate, they unearthed a stone coffin. The coffin was not buried very deep, and when it was discovered, it emitted a terrible stench that spread for miles. The feng shui master was shocked. Despite his many years of experience, he had not detected anything unusual about the area. He walked over to the coffin, examined it carefully, and took a handful of soil from the site. He sniffed the soil thoughtfully and then told the village chief, "Let's stop working for today. All the villagers should go home immediately and remember not to go out tonight. We will resume this work tomorrow at noon, specifically between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. After saying these words, the feng shui master left with a very serious expression. Zidu's grandfather later heard from his own grandfather that on that night the village was unusually quiet. Normally, there would be the sound of dogs barking here and there in the evenings, but that night not a single dog barked. The entire village was eerily silent, with no movement or noise at all. The villagers were filled with unease and anxiety. They spent a long and easy night, waiting until the first light of dawn. No one dared to go outside until the sun was high in the sky. When it was almost daylight, people gradually came out of their houses. They inquired among themselves and found that nothing strange had happened. With the bright sun overhead, the villagers rushed to the place where the stone coffin had been unearthed the day before. To their surprise, the feng shui master was there with a group of Taoist priests, forming a large circle around the coffin. They were all sitting cross-legged on the spot, eyes closed and murmuring something under their breaths. The village chief and several elders stood by, too anxious to disturb them, watching intently. The other villagers also kept quiet, not daring to make a sound or discuss what was going on. They waited until by the clock it was almost noon. Then the feng shui master opened his eyes and said to the Taoist priests around him, "All right, it's done." Everyone opened their eyes and stood up. The feng shui master walked over to the village chief and said, "We have dealt with the issue of the stone coffin, but there is one more thing. A tree must be planted at the spot where the coffin was found. It has to be a cherry blossom tree. This tree will help resolve the past grievances and karma." After speaking, a Taoist priest stepped forward. They had prepared a sapling in advance and had discussed it with the village chief. Under the guidance of the priest, the chief instructed the younger villagers to plant the cherry blossom tree at the exact spot where the stone coffin had been found. They also buried a piece of red jade inscribed with talismans along with the tree. The feng shui master and the priest warned the chief and the villagers present to protect this tree. With the tree in place, the village would remain safe and prosperous. Later, the feng shui master and the priests arranged for the villagers to help them carry the stone coffin to the bank of Anurbhi River. They dug a deep pit there and buried the coffin in the traditional way as if it were a regular funeral. After that, the priests performed a ritual by the river. From then on, every year on the first day of the 10th lunar month, the villagers would send someone to the riverbank to pay their respects, just as they would during ancestral worship. However, after hearing this story, Ziyu didn't take it seriously. She thought it was just another folk tale that people heard all the time. How could it be so eerie? So she didn't feel any sense of empathy or take it to heart. But this is one version of the story about the origin of the cherry blossom tree. A few years passed, and after graduating from elementary school, Ziyu and Zidu were admitted to the same junior high school. This school was farther from home, and the two girls would leave early in the morning and return late in the evening, always together. Ziyu still remembers an autumn evening. It got dark early that day. Zidu's family had a gathering, so her parents picked her up from school early, leaving Ziyu to ride her bike home alone. As Ziyu passed the village entrance, she noticed a large crowd gathered there. Curious, she wondered what's going on. With so many people surrounding, she pedaled her bike to the edge and tried to get a better look. After locking her bike and slinging her school bag over her shoulder, she pushed her way through the crowd. Ziyu said she saw a scene that she would never forget. A van had crashed into the cherry blossom tree at the entrance of the urban village, and the damage was severe. Shattered glass was scattered all over the ground. But that wasn't the worst part. Trapped between the van and the tree trunk was a male corpse. A man had been killed in the collision, and his body was pinned between the cherry blossom tree and the van. When Ziyu saw the scene, she was taken aback. Blood was everywhere. The man was stuck between the vehicle and the tree, and a large pool of dark red liquid had formed on the ground. It was unclear whether it was blood or something else. The sight was horrifying for the young girl, who had never witnessed an accident scene before. Her first thought was, is that blood? Why is it this color? And how could a person bleed so much?